Welcome to the 33rd Freedom Lecture in the Bali, made possible by V-Fonds and Stichting Democratie en Media. We are really happy and honored with our special guest who is going to take us to the current situation in Myanmar, Thinzar Shunlei Yi. And also with us today, journalist Minka Nijhuis. But before we're going to listen to her Freedom Lecture, the Freedom Lecture of Thinzar Shunlei Yi, we will first take a dive in the history of Myanmar up to the point where we are now. What happened in the recent history that has led to the protests today? So I want to welcome Maaike Matelski. She has an interdisciplinary background in social sciences with a focus on anthropology, development, human rights, civil society, and social movements. In 2016, she finished her PhD on civil society in Myanmar at the Free University of Amsterdam.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm very honored to do the opening remarks for the talk by Thinzar and by Minka, both of whom have meant a lot for reporting on Myanmar in various periods of time. I'm here in my capacity as a former PhD researcher at the Vrije Universiteit here in Amsterdam. And my thesis covered the transition period between 2010 and 2015. And I followed a number of civil society actors from Myanmar as they maneuvered between continued restrictions and new opportunities around that time, and also how they navigated between local and international audiences. And most of the activists I followed are now in their 30s or 40s, so basically the generation after Thinzar. So I want to cover briefly some political developments up to now, the role of resistant movements and the current situation we're in, the country's in. So Myanmar was formerly known as Burma. It was a British colony, and Aung San Suu Kyi's father, Aung San, led the independence movement from Britain. Sadly, he was shot dead just before the country gained independence. And he had promised a form of federalism to various ethnic groups that were brought under the banner of Burma. And unfortunately, this never materialized. So General Aung San was also the founder of the Burmese army, hence there's a strong connection between Aung San Suu Kyi and the legacy of her father. So what followed after a brief period of independence was nearly 50 years of military rule, divided up in a couple of periods, 62 to 88, 88 to 2010, and unfortunately now the new one since 2021. And what the military has left is a legacy of repression, of divide and rule between various ethnic and other groups in the country, but also they have a very bad track record of social and economic government, which had had very significant effects on the situation in the country. As some of you may know, Aung San Suu Kyi came back from living in the UK and ran for elections in 1990, which she won, but those results were never honored. And in the years that followed, she spent many years under house arrest. And then the military itself sort of started a transition, political transition process. And the first elections were held in 2010, won by President Thein Sein's party. And unexpectedly, he initiated a series of political reforms. Then the next elections were held in 2015, won by Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD party. And she served as state councillor under two consecutive presidents. In some ways, NLD rule was also disappointing for activists inside the country who saw their space diminishing. And of course, it was quite disappointing for observers outside the country due to the violence perpetrated against the Rohingya while the NLD was in power. General Min Aung Hlaing became head of the army, or Tatmadaw at the time, and was also responsible for the crimes committed against the Rohingya. So conflict in border areas, fighting with various ethnic groups continued, There were also a number of high-profile political murders during that time, but at the same time there was political liberalization and the country opened up to tourist business and diplomats. And in 2020, new elections were held and the NLD received a large number of votes, probably also because there were a few competing parties that were attractive to voters. Now, earlier this year, in February, Min Aung Hlaing staged a coup and installed a new military government state administrative council. Reasons are difficult to determine, but may have to do with the NLD sort of infringing on the position of the army, maybe the fact that Min Aung Hlaing himself was reaching retirement age. Clearly, they had also seen in the Rohingya case that international action was largely absent, but the reason they gave was election fraud, which is also a tested claim internationally. In terms of resistance movements, there have been continued occasional popular uprisings, the largest ones being 1988, then 2007 called Saffron Revolution, and 2021 referred to as Spring Revolution. And what is different this time is an increased media presence and coverage. Most of these movements are in some way initiated by youth and students, but they've always been a mixed group of also religious actors. And this time there's a large role for civil servants who are also staging the civil disobedience movement by refusing to work under military rule again. So as I said, the social media is a large difference with previous movements that everyone can sort of follow what's going on real time. The army itself is also using new tactics such as TikTok and also digital surveillance. Another new factor that we'll hear about is the role of Generation Z. And the various tactics that are being used are ranging from banging pots and pans in resistance to military rule, large-scale protest, often very creative, people dressing up, holding various, sometimes humorous signs, the civil disobedience movement that I already mentioned, and also the fact that the movement seems largely leaderless, although a few very courageous people are at the front. As you know, there have been over 800 people killed since then, including bystanders and a number of children. There were about 5,000 people detained as a result of these protests. Some might have been released in a recent prison amnesty. And there's various campaigns that I think we'll hear more about, such as the Sisters to Sisters campaign. Today is also Min Aung Hlaing's birthday, and some activists have been staging mock funerals in protest. A national unity government has been founded by ousted politicians and a number of civil society leaders, and they are trying to be more inclusive of ethnic and other sexual minorities, for example. Some have publicly stated regret for their lack of solidarity with Rohingya in the past. So the current situation by some of my friends was summarized as conflict, coup, and COVID. Conflict has flared up in various parts of the country, resulting in over 200,000 people displaced as a result of airstrikes, among other things. Resistance against the military continues. A People's Defense Force has been started trying to resist, sometimes with armed resistance, also in the central areas of Myanmar. And the impact of COVID is also significant. And the government, as I said, military is very bad at having good social or economic policy. So yeah, it's very worrisome what will happen if the COVID pandemic increases in the country. Yeah, many people have been arrested, tortured. Some have recently received death sentences. These include journalists, celebrities, lawyers, aid workers, and even children and family members of activists who've gone into hiding. A small number of foreigners also been detained, including academic Sean Turnell from Australia, who's still held in an unknown location. People are basically trapped inside the country. They cannot leave, they cannot get their cannot leave legally, get their passport renewed. They cannot travel anywhere due to COVID. Some have fled to border areas such as Thailand, but they've not received a warm welcome there. Other people are in safe houses throughout the country, so there is a lot of fear and very little protection at the moment. The army, I would say, has very little domestic legitimacy left, but it does have a few powerful international friends, mainly Russia and China, which makes it very hard for international community to act in a unified voice. ASEAN has not really spoken out convincingly, and the country is currently surrounded by other authoritarian governments. There are two investigations by courts in The Hague on the Rohingya crimes, but they have a very small mandate and they tend to take a very long time. Many people are being fired because of being on strikes or they're forced back to work. The People's Defense Force might have been involved in some bombing and violent attacks, but we never know like who is behind those attacks, whether the army may also try to stir up chaos. And now that protesters are no longer being shot in clear sight on social media, there's a risk of less international attention. So it's really important to have events like these to continue attention for this serious situation. So I'll give the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you, Maaike. And then I want to welcome now Thinzar Shunlei Yi. She's the winner of the Women of the Future Southeast Asia Award 2019 and Emerging Young Leader awardee. She works with a local political coalition called ACDD as an advocacy coordinator for human rights and democracy in Myanmar. Welcome.
Thank you. The first speaker have covered almost all the situations, what's happening on the ground right now as well. So I also want to take this opportunity to appreciate for your solidarity and for organizing such an important event, because that's the main thing that we are worrying since the very beginning. How long would this last? We will never know. I thought like maybe 3 months or 4 months and we make it over, but not yet. It's a 5th month, that July is the 5th month after the coup. And what we worry is the international community having a lot of things going on in their hands with the COVID situations and all the conflicts happening in Africa and all of different areas, in 2021, the world has suffered a lot of decreased freedom in 2021, more than ever, because of the COVID situations. The government's taken advantage of this situation to restrict our freedom more and more. And Myanmar is now facing not just the COVID, but also coup and conflict, as the first speaker was saying. So I believe that such kind of events will promote more awareness about what's happening and how it is so important that we all rise up together to help each other, to be in solidarity with each other. So that's one of the reasons why I organized Sister to Sister campaign, because we're trying to build a solidarity amongst the oppressed woman in the authoritarian country, and not just authoritarian, but also as woman to woman. We may have different suffering, but we are facing similar discrimination just because of our sexual orientations, being a woman, being a young woman. So that's how we've been building solidarity at the same time. And with the situation inside the country, we are also now campaigning for the recognition of the National Unity Government, which is a lawful government out of the previous election result and so on. At the same time, I do appreciate the Netherlands government, for example, joined in the ICJ case, and such as a clear example that how international governments should be leading in holding the perpetrator accountable, making sure justice is served for the victims, for the survivors, especially in the Rohingya crisis. So we think, as myself, what's happening in Myanmar is a clear result of complete impunity that the military has enjoyed throughout their life. They have killed thousands and thousands. Last 2 weeks ago, we commemorate a memorial service for the Shan massacre in 24 years ago. That's where the military started using focus strategy, especially in ethnic minorities areas. And in first week of June, we commemorated a 10-year anniversary of Russian civil war in Kachin State in northern part. So all these memories just makes us feel this is not new. Nothing is new right now. The military kill in bright daylight with sniper. They kill indiscriminately, whether it is woman, young, or a child. They just grab everyone, and they are raiding in houses, and arresting everyone, and issuing arrest warrants. Even myself, I was also issued. So many of the young people also feeling having threats because they are young. It's a kind of a threat right now. That's how it is. So I felt that cutting the impunity is the first thing that we have to strike. And that's how I was campaigning in the past 10 years, talking to different governments and different parliaments to make sure they hold these perpetrators accountable. And the first thing they can do is to impose sanctions, to impose embargo. And now we are welcoming different governments and imposing sanctions, not just on the military general, but also on their businesses. Not just businesses, just today we welcome the sanction by the US government on the military family members, the wives and spouses of the military general. So that's how we all have that collective, coordinated, action against the perpetrators. So that's how I felt what is going on right now.
Yes.
So I think I have.
Shirley, can I also ask you, before we dive into it further, where are you right now? Because I see a really beautiful background, but that's not really where you are. I think that's a digital Zoom photo.
Yeah, background. That's began in the middle part of Myanmar. It's a historical site, Almost everyone knows that it's a tourist attraction in Myanmar, but currently I'm hiding. I've been moved out my house since February 1st. I moved into 9 different, I counted already 9 different safe houses so far. Mm-hmm. So we have to move from one place to another to ensure that we avoid the detection. And so I can explain where I'm exactly right now.
But you are in Myanmar, or you also can say in which country you are.
I don't want to expose. Yes. I don't want to expose where I am, but I'm not in the 100% safe place yet. Yeah, I'm not.
And maybe it's nice if you start with your freedom lecture. Yes. And then I can ask you more questions, and I also I'm going to welcome Minka Nijhuis to talk with us on the current situation in Myanmar.
Okay. Thank you. I think I have 10 minutes or so, no?
Yes, take your time.
Yeah. So it's a privilege that I get to talk about freedom, but I'm not 100% sure or confident enough that I can elaborate about the freedom, because I feel like in my whole life, I've never experienced freedom, a complete freedom, or a freedom that I imagined I would have if I could change a system or a government. So, but I will try my best, taking this opportunity to share you how freedom should look like from my eyes as an activist from Myanmar. So to me, freedom is an inborn quality, and now it is suppressed. And we were forced to unlearn it. So we're now trying to relearn it to be ourselves. Freedom as our own. Freedom is not owned by anyone but ourselves. So that's the fundamental belief that I have, because freedom is also not just about external factor, but also inside internal factor as well. So the freedom as a whole is two-way work, the internal and external factor to myself. Because if we are free ourselves internally, but what if we can express ourselves? And if we express ourselves, then we got jailed or killed or arrested, then we're not totally free. But at the same time, when you are given privileges or a great system that allows you to express yourself, but you don't have any power to express yourself, or you don't have any awareness about what is your expressions, or you can express yourself, but then you are not free at all. So I think the complete freedom comes with two different factors, internal and external. So I would love to elaborate more on that. So for myself, I was brought and lived through in a suppressed regime throughout my whole life, and also I was raised in the military, actually. So my father is a captain, and all my family lines are from the military related or the government related officials. So the way we lived, I was raised is quite different from how the others were living outside. The other people, I always look up to them, and they are like, they were not scared of military, and they were joining in the protests. They were opposing the military, not just now, but in the past 30 years, throughout the year I live in. They have the ability to go against the military that I'm in, but as I myself inside the military unit, I couldn't, and I never know that I can. That's the main difference I felt. So in the military unit, as you see, we were not treated as human. We were treated as a part of the system, like robots. So and I have the power based on what my father is. So if my father is a captain, then I got some power that soldiers, the normal soldiers and children, they will have to look up to me. They will have to listen, obey what I'm saying to them. The same goes to other high-ranking officials. If I have to submit to the other different high-ranked officials, daughters and sons, and so on. So that's how I was living in. I never learned about freedom or human rights or being a human. I've never learned that. This is a quality that I have. But when we have that democratic transition in 2010, I have a chance to explore further, because in the university, we have some kind of debates and so on. So I learned about democracy and a bit of human rights that I never have a chance to exercise myself. But throughout all these theoretical learning, I also felt like freedom is not just about having all these privileges or ability to talk back to the other, to the oppressed people, but also to the oppressor, but also to have that awareness that we have basic freedom of expressions, to express ourselves, to think what we believe in, and able to exercise this on a daily life. And that's how I became an activist, and I became freedom of expression activist. And so at the same time, what we are having right now in the country, the many young people and the peoples of Burma, we have been fighting for the freedom that the military has taken away since 1st February. But at the same time, were we really free in the past 5 years? That was the question. But people thought we are not free now because the military took over. But actually, the government, the system that we live in was purely a failure. That's what we are warning to our people, but people don't want to see that, and they didn't realize that we were living with that system. They just thought there is the military and there is the NLD. So if NLD is not in power, we're not free at all. But actually, it's the whole system, the political system, mainly drafted in the 2008 Constitution, the constitution drafted by the military has put us into a system that we enjoy a certain amount of freedom, but actually we're not. We couldn't broaden our freedom. So I was advocating to the parliament, and I was talking to different, to reform the administration pillar or to reform the laws that that violate freedom of expression, but I couldn't. We couldn't. In the end, we will always got the answers. No, we can't, because the 2008 constitution is there. The constitution didn't allow us to do this and that and everything. And we realized it is not just the military or the NLD. It's about the system and the way you think freedom should look like, the way you exercise in why you are in power. So now I felt what's happening in Myanmar is a full-blown revolution, not just to overthrow the military out of the place, but also to ensure we revolt against their ideology or oppressions, violences, and all forms of discrimination, so that we can be totally free. So that's the main thing I believe we are now striving for. So freedom is so expensive in my eyes, and that's one of the reasons why the other countries, such as in Europe or in US, shouldn't take advantage of it. When you have that power to freely express yourself, then you can use this to speak on behalf of all the other voiceless people in other different nations, not just in Myanmar, but also in other different oppressed nations. So freedom is also an internet work. It's about liberating yourself to of how you believe in, how you see yourself. To liberate yourself, you need to acknowledge, we need to acknowledge we have the power within ourselves. So there are different types of power going around us every day. The information power, expect power, or legitimate power, even the coercive power that military is using to all of us. So by acknowledging these power, we are combating the power over us with the power within ourselves, because everyone have that power. So by acknowledging that we have the power, we gather among ourselves to consolidate all these power among us, and we combat against the coercive power the military is using over us, using different leader forces, killing. They are basically instilling all the fears that they've been using. So we are now outsmarting the military and their strategies by making sure we are making the most out of our own power within ourselves. So just for an example, June 26 marked the 46th anniversary of the killing of Salai Temau. He was a student leader and a Chin national, one of the ethnic minorities. He was the first student 46 years ago. He received death sentence for the first time in Myanmar, and he was killed by the dictator in Myanmar. And before he got killed, he said a very remarkable word, and now we are looking up to his quote. That quote is about, I will never go down to a dictator. You may murder me, but you can't murder my belief or what I stood for. So that's a very basic concept that's what the revolution is all about right now. They may jail us, but they can jail our ideology, our free soul, because we are free and we are exercising our power to combat these coercive power they are putting on us. And at the same time, I think, even though he was killed, his belief and his legacy keep shining because he kept his power, take his last breath. He did not just trade it or compromise it with what he firmly believed in. That was freedom looked like to me. And looking at what we had in the past 5 years or 10 years, I think we are freer than ever internally, because in the past 5 years, I've been told many different reasons. I should not speak up to Aung San Suu Kyi or to the government or to the military. There are a lot of excuses. Like we should not upset the civilian government. We should not, give them some hardship by criticizing them or so on. A lot of things, and people censor themselves. For example, what happened in Rohingya crisis. The journalists inside the country or even activists like us, human rights defender, they censor themselves and they're fearful of that public criticisms to them. They don't care about what international community might think, but they care about what their family members or their close circle are thinking about them if they speak up for them, for the Rohingya population or for the oppressed minorities. So basically they self-censor, they trade that freedom that they have with Aung San Suu Kyi because her power is so influenced, her soft power is so influential and in the country. And that's how they traded that. And I felt I deny myself, I and a few of our young activists, we deny to trade it. And we stay stood with our own power and we stay speak up to him, to her and her decisions. And we receive a lot of criticism, like online, offline, death threats, and all of it. So I think freedom to me is the ability to speak up to power, speak truth to power, speak true about yourself internally, believing in what you believe in. At the same time, freedom is also a system that gives you that freer society where you can free to think and act. Thank you so much.
You told us you were raised in a military compound. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, growing up in a military compound?
We live with a constant fear that we're gonna lose our parents, or like my daddy always going to a battlefield and we wonder if he could come back alive. And yeah, in the military, there are a change of oppression and change of violence. I think what we are seeing right now, how the soldier react, how the soldier kind of treating to the civilians like torture and all sort of things. I have seen that countless times inside the military.
Can you give us an example of it?
Yeah, like, a captain can just call on one soldier anytime he wants, and he can exert that power to him with anything he has. Like he can just beat him out of his debt, like he could just bleeding and everything. And that's fine. That's fine, because the captain would say, because he didn't follow my order. He didn't finish what I told him, so that I beat him out of it. And that was acceptable because the military trained their people, the soldiers, that way, using coercive menace as a way to suppress people. So basically, I live with this throughout my life. I have part of it. I have seen of it countless times. So what I'm seeing right now to the civilian is nothing new, but purely inhumane. I think it's also consequences, the soldiers are now using that the way they are oppressed to the other civilians. Yeah.
And because in your freedom lecture, you also told us a little bit about that it seems a little bit like a privilege when your father is a captain, but at the same time, you told us that doesn't mean you're living in a free system. Can you remember the moment that you thought, I'm not living in a free system?
Yeah, I was raised, and I was a curious kid. I always ask questions to my dad about what's going on around me and so on. So sometimes I ask about the leaders of the military. For example, Myanmar. That time it was Than Shui. I remember I asked why he is not yet retired, even though he's like over 70. But my dad, you have to retire when you turn 60.
Yes.
That was a very basic question. And my dad said, why you are asking that? You have no right to ask that. You should not ask that. And my mom come in and feel that because he has superpower. He have done a great thing in his past life. So he's now in a place irreplaceable. He's enjoying these because he have done good things in his past life. So those are like the basic answer I received. I never satisfied with this.
Yeah. And do you think this background, your background, how does it influence your activism right now?
Yeah, I think the way I understand the privileges that I enjoy inside the military, I never lived through with that fear that my friends have to go through just because of their from ethnic minorities or because of their religions, right? I'm the majority Burmese, Buddhist nationals in the country, also was brought in the military. So we felt powerful outside the military, inside the military. That's how I understand I was such a privilege. And I felt like once I realized all these atrocities that my background, the military has committed throughout the whole, the history, I was so disappointed. At the same time, I decided I'm gonna have to pay back. That's a very basic thing that I'm gonna have to work harder than others because I enjoy the privileges.
Yes.
And that's how I spoke it more than others. Yeah. And popular ideas.
Yeah. And can you maybe explain to us, like the people in the Netherlands here, more about all the different kinds of ethnic groups in Myanmar?
Yeah, we have 135 ethnicity listed by the previous dictator Ne Win, but we never believe in that. The list is not correct, and we wonder there are many other groups left out from the list. So in the list, Burmese are the majority, and I was like raised as a Burmese Buddhist. So I'm the majority. But when I tracked down my family line, my grandparents and my grandparents, they were actually coming from Shan State. So there is a high chance that they were Shan people, but they were changed into Burmese. So the numbers of Burmese grew that way. Many ethnic minorities also submit to Burmese majority as well because it's safe to be Burmese in the country where the majority rule. The Buddhism is the main religion, so they feel safer. So they just change it when they register their birth or when they have the NRC national registration card. Sometimes they just Burmanize. We call it Burmanization. It's the main system that drives ran the whole country. So we have different types of ethnicity, more than 135. So now we are reforming to a new nation. So we need to, make a clear list, a review, and make sure who is in. And we don't believe in the ideology, the terminology that they created, Dayinda. We don't use this because Dayinda in Burmese is also another discriminatory term to exclude the other different minorities, like, for example, Rohingya.
And growing up, did you were there also people around you who weren't part of your ethnic group?
Yeah, I school in a military school. So in the military, there are most of them are Burmese. So I never ever have a friend throughout my childhood that are coming from the other different ethnic minorities. So I live with Burmese. Burmese are the main thing that I learned. But I learned a few about the other minorities from the textbook. But still, Burmese is like we never thought we are the ethnicities. We never thought we are ethnicity because we are like everywhere. We are the system. We are the government. So that's how I was. Now we are trying to reshape all these narratives.
Yeah, and when did you get in touch with other people or people from other ethnicities?
I had to make a choice. I have to make a choice throughout my life, like who I'm gonna be friend with. So when I became an activist, I faced a lot of backlash, kind of trust issue, because I'm Burmese, Buddhist, also coming from military. So many ethnic minorities people and that activists, they don't trust in what I'm doing, and so on. So I have to take time. I have to listen to them. So I also taught myself a lot about the ethnic minorities issue. I went into different areas to research and see with my own eyes, and change myself. So that's how I think I have more friends now. So throughout my activism in the past 10 years, I made a lot of friends. Also, I am friend many people as well.
And can you take us back to the moment when your activism started?
Yeah. So the first activism I was about the Kachin Civil War. It was in 2012. The Civil War broke out in 2011. In 2012, in around January, I was actually, I was trained to be a teacher, high school teacher. So I was basically learning about education and teaching stuff. But when I joined in the youth forum in Cambodia, then I learned about other different minorities issues, like especially Kachin issue. I never thought that there is civil war going on alive in my country. Even though I was in the military, we have a lot of information gap and misinformation, disinformation, all sort of things. So that was the moment I joined in the peace movement, and the first ever biggest anti-civil war rally. I was one of the organizers. Many of my friends got charged, but I couldn't list my name as the leader at that time because of my family situation and so on. And I regretted that. And after a few years, I decided to came out like as an activist with my name on. And that's how I think I challenged my background people. Like many people were shocked. They don't trust me. And the people I know from the military also attack me, my family, and sort of things.
Yeah. What does your family think about your activism actually?
The activism was not just like overnight. First, I was a volunteer in different education institutions and so on. So as a religious family, they supported me because I'm a volunteer. I serve for other people, and I have a reason why I'm still being an activist, because I'm serving for the people. So that's how I justify what I'm doing to my family members. So that's what Bodhat taught me, to help people. And by changing the system, by challenging the policy, that's how we can impact more. And that's how I explain to my family members. And first, of course, they were worried. They even stopped me. And a lot of different threats coming. But now I think they realize I'm unstoppable.
And your father?
I have strong reason.
And your father, or someone who was a captain at the military? What did he thought about your activism?
He was actually he was transferred to a ministry, and still he is in his last 2 years in the ministry, still a government service member. My father raised me to be an independent woman, because I'm the eldest in the family. So he taught me to be really tough and confident and independent, and that's how I became. And I have all the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. So we ended up in debate, and he always loses. So that's how I think I keep going.
Okay, and can you take us back to the moment of the coup in 2020 last year?
That day we had a kind of a debate and conversation around the coup, the possibility of the coup. And, as an activist, ourselves, we talk a lot about it. We didn't expect that would happen, because we didn't expect military would be that stupid enough to do that. Because from our eyes, military got a lot of privileges with the constitutions, giving them important power to the ministries, important ministry. Also, the civilian leader defending them in ICJ, for example, they are in a good position. Why would they coup? Why would they do this? So we thought, no, this is not possible. But eventually they did. It was such a nightmare, like the worst nightmare I could imagine. And on that day, in that moment, when I got information in the early morning that military staged a coup, I feel like, oh my goodness, we are in the darkest tunnel with no going back, with no turning back, because the military is stubborn that they're going to do what they have. So we're going to have to be extra stubborn to fight back. So that's how I can foresee what's coming to us. Yeah.
How did that look? What did you do? How did you react on the coup?
Yeah, I check with my friends and family, and I received, like, some of my friends was taken away by the police, so I thought of my security, but when I look around their pattern, I may not be in their first list, so I have some time. So what I did was I talked to different medias. I made my own statement of the positions, like I condemned the coup. I will be fighting, till my last breath to take back the power that we have. And so that's sort of a statement I wrote immediately, and I posted on social media. And so all the internet and mobile phones were shut down, but we have state fiber internet going on, like only limited internet. So I had that. So I used this to talk to different media. So I started speaking out since that time, and I got warning. Once you give one interview, you're gonna be jailed for 8 years. But I have given nearly hundreds interview already, and I feel like no, I will not stop anymore.
You're unstoppable.
Unstoppable.
And how did
I think many of young people are like that.
How come? Because you told us, I don't remember if it was in this lecture or that you sent it at your email, but you said you and your generation were forced to unlearn freedom. So still a lot of young people are fighting against the system right now. How can you explain that? People who are grew up in an unfree system who are still fighting right now.
The way I look at it is because it's an inborn quality, the freedom, free to think, free to act like as you think, but we were restricted by the system, by the limitation culturally, traditionally, religiously, and all sorts of things. So, our freedom, our ability to think freely or to act freely was suppressed. And now, because that's how I see it's different than how I was raised and how my youngest sister was raised. So my youngest sister was she was born in 1999. So once she became a teenager, it's already like there is the internet, there is like information technologies, exposures to other different worlds, and there is the democracy, human rights, and the way she acts to assaulting cases have a freer thoughts, like it's like in natural ability that she could think it that way because she see it as it is, because as natural. But for me, in my generations, I have to think it, like I need to think it about it. It's not natural to me because I have to first unlearn all the things that I have learned in the past, throughout my life, and then I need to replace it with new ideology.
So it was also kind of your own imagination who was thinking about freedom.
Yes, exactly. So even my generation, I don't think we will live through this free society. So my sister can tell you more about freedom, how freedom should look like, or our other different younger, generation would have, I believe, I hope they will have more chances to talk about freedom. Yeah.
Okay, I also want to welcome someone who is sitting next to me already half an hour, journalist and writer Minka Nijhuis, who has been traveling back and forth to Myanmar for 30 years already and wrote several books about the region. First question, when was the last time you visited Myanmar?
2 years ago. But may I first take the opportunity to to pay my respect to Thinzar and all those others out there risking their lives. I find it really humbling to listen to you and to see your determination. And I wish you as much safety as possible. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks.
I just would like to say that from the bottom of my heart. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I asked you the last time you visited Myanmar. It was 2 years ago. Did you expect that there was going to be a coup?
Initially, I didn't, but somehow I often thought it was a possibility, but a kind of vague scenario, because the military had so much power already in the constitution that guaranteed them 25% of the seats in parliament, the full control over the most powerful ministries. They had Aung San Suu Kyi, who could be like their visiting card abroad and take all the criticism. So they seem to be in a quite comfortable position. But having said that, I think there was always a possibility that if their power was threatened, that a coup would be a possibility. And I think it's also important to understand that politics in Myanmar are incredibly personal. So the fact
what do you mean by
in the last elections, the NLD party of Aung San Suu Kyi won by a landslide victory was like a slap in the face for the commander-in-chief of Min Aung Hlaing. He had his eyes on the presidency, and he saw the scenario that there, with a very powerful National League for Democracy, that probably there would be an attempt to change the constitution, however difficult that might be. And there were also new measures in the air against corruption. So the military did feel threatened in various ways. And I think that those, even though we don't know, because the official reason they give is that there was fraud, but there wasn't any evidence for that. But that's a sort of analysis that we can make. And, and the closer it came to the 1st of February, the more worried I got. And people were also sending me messages that they didn't feel safe, or they were not sure it was going to happen. So it was a few days before the coup actually happened that it started dawning upon me that it was a very possible scenario, sadly. Yeah.
Can you remember that, Shunlei? The days before the coup?
Yeah, I remember that we were listening to different expert opinions about that possibility and so on. And I was like, I think 80% sure that's not happening, just a joke, sort of things, because how the military would do it and, with all the privileges they are enjoying. At the same time, we are so worried and disappointed at NLD we are seeing that potentiality, like they were being normalized in the 2008 Constitution, because 2008 Constitution gave them access to power, the NLD. So we are basically kind of talking about the ethnic minorities that time.
And do you think, Minka Nijhuis, that a coup is the right name for what happened?
Well, clearly it is a coup, but I think it's a failed coup by now. Because if you talk about a coup, and this was absolutely what the military had in mind, to step in, arrest some key people, and make some changes to strengthen their power, and then get back to business as usual. The opposite thing happened. So they completely underestimated the reaction from the population. It was young people who took the lead, but more and more people joined in. And what makes these protests historical is that they are so much broader than a sort of protest against the military between party members of Aung San Suu Kyi and other pro-democracy activists. People from all walks of life are joining in from generations from different ethnic and religious groups. So it's such a broad, carried movement by now that the military was completely underestimating, and now is facing a reality where they are not only dealing with demonstrations and protests and a civil disobedience movement in the cities, but also increased military activity in the ethnic area. So they have more manpower in terms of weapons and etc., but they are fighting on various fronts now, and that is a situation that has not happened before. So in that sense, they are in uncharted waters, and it's very, very difficult to say where this will go.
And how strong is the military in Myanmar?
It's hard to tell exactly. Their members in the military are sort of estimated between 350,000 and 400,000, but those figures are also inflated. Of course, there is a lot of manpower, and their support, weapon support from China and Russia. They have a very long history, the military, of establishing itself in the country, but there is no support. And clearly within the military, there is also support for the democratic opposition. There has always been the results from the elections show that even military are voting for the party of the Aung San Suu Kyi, but no one dares to be the first one to. There have been a few defections, but not mostly from the lower ranks in the military. But they are brainwashed and they are separated, as Thinzar says, from the society, living as a state in the state. There's no tradition of in the history of the military that there will be a coup within a coup. But at the moment, it's hard to tell because the situation as it is unfolding now is unprecedented.
And what do you mean by a coup within the coup?
Well, where there's a different kind of military in another country, there's always a possibility that a group within the military will think this is harming us as well and it's gone too far. But Myanmar, the Tatmadaw, which is the military, doesn't have really a tradition of doing so. That's an unlikely scenario. But one of the things that is clear that there are many people within the military who are not happy with this. And one thing that really strikes me as well is the fact that even though this civil disobedience movement is putting people into so much trouble and economic poverty, there's hardly any looting by civilians. The ones who are looting are the military, the soldiers, because they are not getting enough pay. And so I think that's a very telling example of that things are not going smoothly for the military either. Having said that, the price that the country as a whole is paying is tremendously high in all possible ways.
Yeah. Before that, one more question about the military. Shunlei Yi, is there any chance that some of the military will choose the side of the protesters of you?
Yeah, many of them already have like nearly 1,000 right now. Have defected to the side of the boss. But the highest rank, as far we see, is just major rank. Not higher than that. So most of them are like very basic soldier and police, especially policemen. They are quite close to the people, and so it's easier for them as well to just left the unit. I even helped some of them to just get out and run away in the early morning, like 3 a.m. So that was possible in the first few months, but now it's getting harder and harder because it's been 5 months already, and now we can clearly see who is who now. And if they didn't defect in the highest killing day, then when would they, right? There is like a day that they kill more than 40 in one day. And that was the day like many soldiers left or the police left. So right now we are also expecting the coup within the coup, like the military inside themselves. But I don't think it is the thing right now. So we are now trying to just attract more defection from the military and the police using different tactics. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And Minka, you have met the former government leader Aung San Suu Kyi, and also Nobel Prize winner, a few times. Was she able to run the country the way she wanted when she was the leader of the country?
Well, when I met her, that goes back to the mid-90s, was in a period that she was mostly under house arrest and her party was severely marginalized. Many of her members were in jail. So it was more like still a movement than a political party with a program. They were not in a situation to function as a proper party. And when she was released in 2010, the layout was already there to guarantee the power of the military. So she stepped into an arena, into a political arena, where her possibility to work was limited. Nevertheless, she had substantial power, and especially she had a very strong moral voice, of course, because she was tremendously popular. But it was right from the beginning always sort of a battle between how much can she and all her party members and others who support her achieve within the framework that the military was allowing, because it wasn't a transition in the sense that it was an ongoing process. Very early on, the military laid out the boundaries of where this could go. Still, I believe she could have done more to raise her voice, to be more the democratic leader with the messages that she used to convey when she was under house arrest. It's rather tragic that in those days she said all the right things about democracy, and people's power and freedom of speech. And when she became the state councillor, she didn't use. Even though it was a limited power, she didn't use it as much as she should have done to bring the country forward.
Do you think the title of Nobel Prize winner of peace still suits her?
I think that's a discussion that really narrows the scope in relation to the situation as it is happening now. That is a truly useless discussion. I really don't see how that is going to help the country, because I think it is really important when you look at what is happening in Myanmar now, don't narrow it down to a battle between Aung San Suu Kyi and the military or what Aung San Suu Kyi has done. This is a far broader movement. Thinzar said, it's a revolution where people from all walks of life are joining in, and I think that's the way to look at it and to see how that movement can be supported, and you can tell from the young people and the messages that they have. They truly want a democratic federal state with equal rights for all, and so they have already moved beyond Aung San Suu Kyi, and I think that is a very important element to take into consideration when looking at nowadays situation.
Shunlei, what do you think about what Minka said? Have you moved beyond Aung San Suu Kyi?
Yeah, as a young generation, that's the biggest struggle. As I've explained, like people have that censorship, especially around Aung San Suu Kyi. There is like an invisible cloud that are influencing all of us till she disappeared. And none of us could go over her power, because her power was accumulated along the years and years for different reasons, for her sacrifice, personal sacrifice to what she was doing in the past when she was under arrest, and so on. And many different international community have also put her in that titles for different reasons. And all these created a kind of heroine figure inside the country. And inside the country, we have people with lack of critical knowledge, critical thinking, and they are unable to see a person and her work. So they just generalize her as a goddess. So that's how she became. And now she is untouchable kind of political figure who is in power, deciding our future and making poor decisions and causing damages to the minorities, to Rohingyas, to ethnic minorities, and so on. Now younger generation are trying to cover that up. Why she is locked right now? That's a very clear scenario that I would say. Many younger politicians inside her party are now making quite a radical decisions to keep this going forward. And that's totally against what she would be doing if she is outside.
Yes.
So our main worry is if she came out right now and she say, no, we don't do revolution. We do negotiate with military, and half of the population would just dive in and, okay, let's follow her. Let's just put all our trust on her. And that's how it would end up. If she could have done that, and she has that potential. And so now we are in the very, edge that we're not sure if the current leaders would have that guts to resist her if she says something against what they are doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the situation.
So it should be about you as the young generations of protesters now.
We are so sure that we will resist whoever is going to compromise with the military. So that's how it is. And anyone, like we first call out, we are resisting all forms of dictator. So that's how the ethnic minorities and the activists and the students leaders, we have voiced that out, but our voices were not heard enough in the international community, especially during Rohingya crisis. I have to pay a lot of price. Like I got a lot of criticism because I speak up to the media about Rohingya, that where I stand, because all of our older generation leaders, they just shut their mouth and they didn't say any words. And I think, mainly because they are worried about Aung San Suu Kyi's stand. They don't want to go against her. And another part, like they believe in what she is doing. So that's how all mess up with the Rohingya crisis. Mm-hmm. That's how the whole country was portrayed, obviously, as a racist country. Many of us are, of course, but they are like certain amount of young population who are fighting the racism, paying all the prices. Yeah.
A lot of protesters have fled to the outside regions. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is happening over there in the outside regions of Myanmar, the border regions?
What do you mean exactly? Yeah.
The situations in the borders of Myanmar.
Oh, okay, within Myanmar,
yes.
Within the border areas.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, those are mostly the areas populated by about a third of the population, and those groups have been struggling for equal rights and more autonomy, as Michael also explained, basically since 1948, when the country became independent. And they never received equal rights within a federal state. But there were ceasefires with some groups and fighting with others. And this was also the tactic of the military to divide and rule. But even the ceasefires never really materialized in political agreements. And the situation that we are seeing now, where the fighting is flaring up in those areas, and tens of thousands civilians are fleeing into these areas for safety from central Myanmar. The ethnic populations themselves are being displaced, and this is a very much a déjà vu moment. Because if you talk to people from the ethnic areas, and I traveled in those places for weeks over the past 30 years or so, there are people who don't even remember how many times they had to flee. And this is their history. And the people in central Myanmar often didn't really have an idea that there was such a brutal war going on, because those areas were often off limits. And also the people in central Myanmar, they were very preoccupied with their own struggle against the military. But the ethnic people had a military dictatorship as well as a war on their plate. And in those areas is now a humanitarian crisis unfolding of a tremendous scale. And it's difficult to get access for organizations to help. But at the same time, I also see and hear from groups there that there is determination to give this struggle a chance, even though, you know, it's still the grievances against the groups in central Myanmar, and especially, of course, the military, but also the democratic forces. It's a long history of mistrust and Burman domination. So this attempt to form a unity between the people from central Myanmar and ethnic groups, it's a remarkable attempt, but it's also very fragile, and it can easily break down. And of course, the military will manipulate this into divide and rule. And there is a worry that the groups that have a Burman background will and are from an older generation, as Thinzar said, will try to dominate this whole movement again. But I think to look at what is happening now and the determination of so many people to change the country, change the system, that's also reason for hope.
It's a reason for hope.
Yeah, the cost, I don't want to underestimate the price that people pay. The cost is tremendous, and it will be a long, long struggle. And already millions have ended up in poverty, and there's renewed fighting and internally displaced people and everything. But it's perhaps difficult from the safety of the Netherlands, where we see the victims and the brutality every single day, and you feel like, for God's sake, let them stop, because anything is better than these killings and the torture. But if you know the history of Myanmar and that people have lived in such brutal dictatorship for decades, and then the past 10 years, they had a bit of a chance to change, and they don't want that chance to be taken away from them. They don't want to go back to the dark ages of their parents and their grandparents. And I think that's the way to look at it, in order to understand why are people willing to pay such a high price, right? Thinzar, or what do you think?
Yes, I agree. And I also thought, like, what we have is something inevitable at the same time. That kind of revolution could have happened in the past, in 2010, when the NLD kept counting the election, kept counting the 2008 constitution. Then the revolution already had happened in 2010. But it didn't, because the NLD compromised and they joined in, and we have 10-year transition. But what I felt as the young generation is what we are having is like unfinished business, that we have to finish it, because Myanmar was never a complete process. We have never gone through a complete process for nation building. We need to just, start from the scratch. So that's how I think we have to even think, like, question about our name, Myanmar or Burma, for example. We're not sure, and we don't like none of it. We don't like any of it. And even like even different names and ethnic names, a lot to work on. There are many things that we have to work on. So yes, it's a long struggle, but I am feeling a bit relaxed than the previous 10 years, because now we don't have like barrier. We don't have the Aung San Suu Kyi defending in front of us, in front of the military, making us confused with what's happening. No, now we have a clear path that we are going for a full-blown revolution. We're gonna pay the price. Even I could get jailed, I don't mind, but that's how I think we have to finish the whole process, making sure we reach to another level. And yeah, I'm hopeful, especially with the younger generation, having a different mindset, different thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. We're at the ending of this talk, but first I want to give you the opportunity if you want to say something that you think is important. Thinzar Shunlei Yi and also Minka Nijhuis.
Or Maaike, perhaps?
Or Maaike, if you were going to stand over there, but... Starting with you, Thinzar. And there's one question that I want to ask. What do you expect from the international community?
I want international communities to feel angry, just like the way we are angry, to feel disappointed at the way we got bullied by a military with the men with arms power. They got away with all the crimes that we can imagine, the worst crime ever, the genocide. They still got away with us. We should be angry with this, because this is a clear threat to our collective humanity and our democracy, not just in Myanmar, but to the whole region and to the world. And that's how I think international community, especially the neighboring country in Myanmar, they have to reflect what they have done wrong since the very beginning. They are not just correcting the military behavior, but they are just enforcing by being neutral. They are being neutral. Being neutral in this situation is like they are taking sides with the evil. So that's how we are so disappointed with our neighboring country, that they are not so active in solving the problem, but just get to, go and flow with what the military dictate to them. Yes. And they are gonna get normalized, and we don't want it. And that's how I think countries like yourself, having a bigger future, like having bigger freedom, can jump in and explain to these countries how it is important to have a collective advocacy and push and pressures to the military one day. Thank you.
Yes. Let's start from your final notes, if you have one, Maaike Mattelski.
Yeah, just briefly, I think the anger and the ending impunity is very important, but it's not enough. There's multiple crises in the country. There's a risk of food shortage. There's a health crisis, economic crisis, and I think international community also has a responsibility there to step in and assist. I mean, the arms are coming from abroad, and the assistance should also come from abroad.
Thank you. And Minka Nijhuis?
Yes, I think individual states can do more than they are actually doing at the moment. The situation is very complicated at the level of the Security Council, but individual states can look at arms embargo. They can look at more specific sanctions against the military. And what I often hear from people in Myanmar, they say, whatever you do, don't give the military any legitimacy. There is now an alternative government. They are the government that was formed by the chosen, democratically elected parliamentarians and other people from the society. Give them support, look at possibilities to recognize them. So don't hide behind the fact that things are so complicated at the global level. Individual countries can also take acts.
Yes. And I want to give the final word to you. What are your hopes for the future, Thinzar Shunlei Yi? Now we don't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, there you are.
Okay. So as I have explained you about my stories, my personal stories, because that's how I felt I was privileged, and now I'm serving back to our people because I've enjoyed the privileges without knowing it, and I realized with all these privileges I have that power. I have the majority power. I have that, the connection power and language power. I'm using it. I also have internet power that I'm connecting you. So by using all these power I have, I'm speaking on behalf of the voiceless and the disadvantaged people who couldn't speak up for themselves. And that's how I think freedom. If I enjoy a certain amount of freedom, that's how I would take responsibility of the freedom I'm enjoying. And that's how I believe you all, as a country in the first world countries, should take this into as a part of your responsibility to help the other countries in needy situations, in difficult situations. And so by having that kind of mindset, we're going to have more activists or advocate for the countries in disadvantaged situations. And that's how I think I'm hopeful for our humanity, collective humanity in the world. At the same time, I think our young generation are growing, not just in my country, but global. It's a global activism that we have as a young generation. We have a different perspective, the way we see about climate crisis or the dictators and so on. So we will keep rising up, and I'm hopeful with our young people. So we're gonna have more connection among us, and that's how I think we're gonna change the narrative in the world.
Thank you so much, Thinzar Shunlei Yi. It was a really great honor to hear you talk all these beautiful words on freedom. Thank you so much. And also, thank you, Minka Nijhuis. And thanks to Maaike Matelski for the great talk at the beginning of this evening.
Thank you.